Hi, my name is Sophia, and to be honest, lately my life has been like a roller coaster, from happiness to discouraging irritation. I am 31 years old, and I used to think that my life was built a job in marketing, which I love, a successful career as a manager, respect from colleagues. Until recently, it seemed like it was the perfect path. A little over a year ago, I married Paul, my first love, the very man who has always supported me and shared my dreams from the very beginning, ever since we met in college. Our eyes shone the same when we swore allegiance to each other, and the first months after the wedding seemed like a fairy tale. Life went on calmly, we made plans, sincerely enjoyed every minute, as if the whole world was adjusting to our happiness. And then something absolutely incredible happened, something that we both had been waiting for, but did not believe it would happen so quickly. I found out that I was pregnant. It was a message that could turn anyone's life upside down, and for us it was an absolute triumph of love. Paul and I decided to keep everything a secret for now. This little secret, full of tenderness and dreams, was only ours. But I could barely contain my joy. One evening, unable to stand it, I turned to Paul, and looking into his shining eyes, I whispered, "Can you believe that? We will be parents." And he hugged me tightly, hugging me to him as if nothing else mattered at that moment. However, keeping this wonderful news a secret turned out to be more difficult than I could have imagined, especially when Paul's family was in our environment. It was a little more complicated here. His mother, Janet, is a kind person, but her care sometimes weighs down like a heavy blanket. She tries to take care of Paul as if he is still a child who needs her constant advice. She is one of those who can roll her eyes if something is not done according to her standards, or casually remark that our family happiness is my concern. Do not think that it arose by itself. His father, Jason, on the other hand, is always silent and almost does not interfere in family conversations. He's like a shadow, always there, but never in plain sight. This creates a strange atmosphere where Janet rolls the ball, surrounded by silent approval. And there's Emma, Paul's younger sister, who looks at me as if I've taken something precious away from her, as if my presence is driving her out of her own family. It's like there's an invisible wall between us that she won't let us break through. There is also Paul's brother, Jacob, who prefers, it seems, to ignore me. His cold indifference is almost physically felt. It's like I'm just a guest who happened to be late for a family holiday. Family gatherings became, to put it mildly, a real test for me, when my every step and every word seemed to be something that was carefully evaluated. For example, during the last dinner, when Paul and I cooked dinner and tried to make everything perfect, Janet, seeing a barely noticeable crease on Paul's shirt, squinted and said, "Paul, dear, you crumpled your shirt again. Does Sophia know how to use an iron?" Her tone was sharp, sharp enough to make me flinch. Emma jumped up from her seat, her eyes burning with the lights of mockery. "Oh, Sophia, don't worry," she said, slightly tilting her head and narrowing her eyes. "Not everyone can be housewives." I felt a wave of irritation shoot through me and felt the blood rush to my face, but I forced myself to hold back. To let them see my vulnerability is to recognize their right to judge. Later, when the tension subsided, I dialed the number of my best friend, Angela, and, gearing her voice, exhaled. "If Janet makes one of her snide comments about how I run the house again, I'm afraid I'll just snap." Angela giggled, and her light, cheerful laugh spilled over the phone like generous butter on bread. "Sophia, dear, you're married to Paul, not his mom. Tell her straight out to stay away," she advised, and there was a confidence in her voice that I lacked so much. "I wish it was that simple," I sighed, clearly imagining Paul nodding patiently in the background, just to avoid any hint of a quarrel. He hates conflicts. I don't want to aggravate an already tense situation, but every time it's the pressure of my mother-in-law, these surreptitiously mocking glances from Emma. I fell silent, realizing that it was only at such moments that I felt how much I was teetering on the edge. Angela, a faithful friend, as always remained my calm island in the midst of these storms. She said softly but insistently, "Sophia, you need to stand up for yourself, especially now that you're having a baby." I knew she was right. All the logical arguments in favor of self-respect were clear, but the very idea of entering into an open confrontation with Janet made me feel slightly sick. Although, to be honest, morning sickness became my constant companion. A few weeks passed, and it became increasingly difficult to hide her pregnancy. My stomach was starting to round up, and I was gripped by a mixed feeling of fear and joy. One night, when Paul and I had already gone to bed, he turned to me, and there was both delight and tension in his gaze. "Sophia," he began cautiously, as if afraid of scaring away our innermost dreams, "I think it's time to tell them about the baby. At dinner next week." His eyes, full of hope, eagerly searched for my answer. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hide this news away from Janet's condemnation, Jacob's cold disregard, and Emma's jealousy. But I knew it couldn't last forever. "Okay," I nodded, trying my best to sound confident. "Let's do this." But even as I said those words, deep down I knew that this announcement could change everything forever, more than I was ready to imagine. It was the day of the ill-fated dinner, and I was cooking with a kind of desperate hope that this would endear Janet to me. I cooked for hours, checking recipes and following every step to create the impression of an ideal hostess, although I realized that this was probably a utopia. As soon as we sat down at the table, Janet, after looking around, suddenly looked up at me and said, "Sophia, dear, your roast is a little dry. You didn't water it, did you?" Her voice was deceptively soft, but with hidden sharpness. I forced a smile and replied in an even tone, "I'll take that into account next time, Janet." Although in my soul my disappointment smoldered like a quiet fire. As if that wasn't enough, Janet took a long look at me and, squinting slightly, added, "And this dress? Is it new? It looks a little cramped, don't you think?" Her gaze slid down, lingering a little on my waist, and I felt my face begin to burn. It was at this moment that Paul cleared his throat, and all eyes turned to him. "Actually, Mom," his voice was quiet but full of determination, "we have news." My heart was pounding like a trapped bird as he looked at me for support. "Sophia and I are expecting a baby," he finally said, and his voice was enveloped in almost childish joy. There was a moment of deathly silence at the table, which was broken by Jason's warm smile, and Jacob muttered some short congratulations. Emma, on the other hand, looked at me with an expression as if she had been served a dish with a sour taste, but it was Janet whose reaction deeply impressed me. "Are you sure, Paul?" she said, turning to him with a wary look. "How do you know she didn't make it up?" Her tone was so icy that it took me a moment to realize she was talking about me. His face was calm, his eyes were good-natured, but there was a wariness in the depths of his gaze, as if he was weighing every word. The doctor came closer and spoke in a soft, encouraging voice. "Sophia, I understand that you have suffered a serious fall. We have carried out all the necessary examinations. Your condition is stable, and, fortunately, your child is safe." For a moment, I froze, letting his words pass through me, absorbing every note of calm and reassuring care that came from him. I closed my eyes, deeply relieved. My child was safe. But the relief was fleeting. The image of Janet in her cold, prickly gaze flashed before my eyes, filling me with the same bitterness that had been suffocating me all evening. How could my own mother-in-law, a woman who should have been happy for us, come down on me with such accusations? And how could Paul? Paul, where is he? Where was he at the moment when I, scared and humiliated, desperately needed support? I was waiting for him to be there, that he would be the firm support who would tell his mother to stop, lift me up and calm me down, dispel my fears. Instead, he hesitated, mocked his own joy, which seemed so real and warm to us yesterday. He let Janet, Emma, everyone, say their cruel, sarcastic words, as if my pregnant belly was nothing more than a burden to them. A few minutes after the doctor's words, a nurse came into the room and informed me that someone was waiting for me outside. My heart started beating faster. Gender? Has he come? Expectation mixed with trembling fear. Did he finally realize how deeply he had hurt me with his indifference? But when the door opened and the unfamiliar figure of my husband stepped into the room, I froze. Emma stood in the doorway, her face a mixture of guilty awkwardness and some strange concern. She did not dare to meet my eyes, her hands were uncertainly tugging at the strap on the bag. "Sophia," she said, as if tasting every word, as if they tasted too bitter. "I just wanted to know how you were." Her words hung in the air, strange and unnatural, as if even Emma's sympathy seemed somehow out of character for her. I could have turned away, disdainfully, responded with cold politeness, but the bitterness inside me burned too brightly. I took a deep breath, pressing the phone to my ear. Thoughts and painful memories of the events of the last few days flashed through my head. I was silent for several minutes, feeling the weight of responsibility descend on me, but Angela was there, whose determination filled me with a new, long-forgotten strength. This call was not spontaneous, it became a symbol of my willingness to protect myself and my unborn child. "Is this Carol Baker's office?" My voice sounded firm, but I barely recognized it. The operator on the other end confirmed, and I almost trembled, but suppressing my excitement, I replied, "I need to talk to her." Meanwhile, Angela returned to the ward, her eyes shining with triumph. She was holding several papers and a small dictaphone in her hands, as if they were trophies from the battlefield. "We have everything: medical records, doctor's reports, staff testimony, and a record of the entire Janet and Emma conspiracy. They won't be able to brush it all off now, Sophia." Through all the bitterness I felt a little better from her words, from her strength, which seemed to be transmitted to me, filling me with determination to go to the end. I sank back onto the bed, allowing myself at least a moment of relief. But the silence did not last long. Muffled voices were heard outside the door, which I immediately recognized. It was Janet, and her voice was saturated with the familiar self-confidence with which she spoke of me as an annoying obstacle that should have just disappeared. Emma, of course, supported her, nodding along as always. "Sophia has always been clumsy," Janet's voice came through the thin walls. "Yes, she probably wasn't even really pregnant. Pretending to cause pity." My fingers clenched into fists, and I felt rage boiling inside me, but Angela, instantly catching everything, gestured at the phone. Without saying a word, she began recording their conversation, carefully holding the device in the slightly open door. Janet and Emma's words flowed like poison, and each new line was absorbed into the audio file as new evidence of their treachery. When they finally left, I looked at Angela, and there was a glint of mutual understanding in our eyes. "That's enough," I said decisively, feeling the fire of a new determination flare up inside me. "Angela, I need your help. We will fight." With every word I uttered, I felt this fire flare up more, fueling my determination to stand up for myself, for my future, for my child. Over the next few hours, we made a plan. Angela, like an experienced strategist, thought through every step. The nurse agreed to give us copies of my medical records, which could confirm both the fact of pregnancy and the injuries sustained as a result of the shock, which became the decisive evidence on which we could rely. The testimony of the hospital staff has become another brick in the foundation of our case. We carefully put together everything that was supposed to stop Janet and Emma once and for all. When all the necessary documents were collected and the records were securely stored, I looked at the phone again. Paul wrote me several messages, and each of them sounded like a distant but still familiar voice. There was a tinge of doubt in them, a desperate desire not to see the truth, as if he still believed in his mother's innocence. These messages were full of regrets and hesitations, and every word seemed strange to me now. Paul stood in front of me, his face tired and exhausted, as if the full weight of the situation had finally fallen on him. There was despair in his eyes, and he barely whispered, "Sophia, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Can we please talk for at least a minute?" I looked at him, feeling mixed emotions. Once his words had a magical effect on me. They were a comfort, joy, and warmed my heart. But now those words seemed empty, like an echo from the distant past. I looked into his eyes and saw that he was really remorseful, but it didn't change anything. His doubts, his hesitations, his inability to support me at the most important moment showed me the true face of our family. "Paul," I replied, trying to remain calm despite the storm of feelings raging inside, "I'm sorry that everything came to this. It's a pity that you're in this position. But I've already made my decision." My words were even, but there was a whole sea of pain and disappointment behind them that I could no longer hide. He was silent, looking down, and for a moment I thought he would realize that it was too late. The secretary's voice came from the courtroom announcing that the meeting was resuming. I nodded slightly to Paul and headed back, feeling the weight of each step, but not doubting my decision. It was the end of our common path, and I felt that as I moved away, my heart finally found the long-awaited peace. When I sat down in my seat, Carol turned to me and, with a slight, encouraging nod, began to explain the last arguments. Audio recordings, medical reports, witness statements, all this has become solid, indisputable evidence, revealing the whole truth before the court. I saw Janet staring at the floor, her face pale and tense, devoid of her usual arrogance, and Emma, turning away, clasping her hands in impotent anger. When the judge turned to Janet, her face, once self-confident and arrogant, was distorted in fear and confusion. "Mrs. Thompson," the judge said, "you are charged with intentional assault, endangering the life of not only your daughter-in-law, but also her unborn child. How do you respond to these accusations?" Janet tried to keep at least some remnants of composure, but her voice betrayed fear, and for the first time she did not seem the unshakable woman I knew her to be. "It was an accident. I didn't want. She was just trying to leave, and I just wanted to stop her." The judge looked at her sternly, clearly realizing that her words were just a weak attempt to justify herself. "You are responsible for your actions, Mrs. Thompson," he said, each sound like a final blow sealing her guilt. "For years later, I am preparing with ease and joy to celebrate my daughter Michelle's 2nd birthday. I'm standing there blowing up bright balloons, feeling more and more every minute how far we've come during this time. Michelle, my brave little warrior, despite all the difficulties, came into this world, and now her happy laughter and loud footsteps fill our house. Angela, a faithful friend, comes in carrying an armful of gifts and colorful bags, smiling so widely that it seems she is ready to give this happiness to everyone around. Where is our birthday girl? Aunt Angel has something delicious," she exclaims with excitement, and Michelle, hearing a familiar voice, immediately rushes to her, squealing with delight. I watch as my daughter, choking with delight, stretches out her tiny hands to her, her eyes shining with joy. A warm gratitude spreads inside me for this happiness, for the fact that I turned out to be stronger than I had imagined. So much has changed since then. From the days when every step was full of pain and fear, and the future seemed hazy and frightening. But now everything is different. I am building my own life, where the pain of the past has become an impetus for a new goal. Using my experience in marketing, I have created my own business and help people who have gone through difficult times to tell their stories. It's not just a job, it's an opportunity to give a voice to those who, like me, once felt vulnerable and forgotten. It is my mission to help people find the strength to survive their pain and give it meaning, to turn weakness into dignity. Janet is no longer in our lives. The justice system treated her act with all seriousness. An attack on a pregnant woman, a threat to her life and the life of a child, is a crime that the law does not forgive. But now her name for me is just an echo of the past that I left behind. Michelle laughs, her clear voice echoing through the room as she laughs and picks up another balloon. I go up to her and hug her, this little flame that warms my life, and I understand. We have found the way to happiness and freedom. I stand at the threshold of my living room, watching my friends, one by one, begin to leave, taking with them the warmth of the evening, fun and kind words. The house is empty, but there is still a feeling of comfort and joy in it, like the warm light of a candle. I see off the last of the guests, gratefully squeeze their hands and finally close the door behind them. These are my people, my relatives, my chosen family, and looking at them, I feel my heart overflowing with gratitude that they are near, that peace, support and laughter now reign in this house, all that I was once afraid of losing. When silence descends on the house, I gently take my sleepy Michelle in my arms, feeling her heaviness and relaxed warmth. She is dozing, and I quietly carry her to her room, putting her in a crib, covering her with a soft blanket. My little girl, my light. Leaning into her tiny face, I whisper, "Happy birthday, my brave girl. The world belongs to you, and it's mine now too." I kiss her on the forehead, feeling a wave of peace cover me, because everything we've been through has brought us here, to the life I've been looking for so long, safe, happy, full of laughter and future hopes. Standing by her crib, I reflect on my path. Michelle and I have been through so much, and I know there may be new challenges ahead, but now I am determined to protect her, both of us, from any shadow of the past. And yet there was one question, quiet as an echo somewhere in the depths of my heart. Did I do the right thing by rejecting Paul's apology? Was it worth cutting off contact with him and his family so abruptly, or did I have the opportunity to give him a second chance, a chance to correct mistakes, to try to be for us who he should have been from the very beginning? I know that each of us has his own story, that each person has the right to make his own decision. But sometimes I think, what would you do if you were in my place? Would you accept an apology, or would you put an end to it for the sake of your own peace of mind and safety? I would like to hear your thoughts, your story, because the fact that we share experiences, learn and support each other here is the most important part of our journey. If my story resonated in your heart, if you also feel how difficult it is sometimes to stay true to yourself and your decisions, please like to support this video. Let's work together to make these stories find those who need them, who are looking for answers to their questions or just want to hear that they are not alone. And if you're interested in learning more, subscribe to the channel. We are here to learn from each other, to heal and grow, and your support means more than you can imagine. Thank you for listening, for staying with us and helping to create a community where everyone can find their place and their solace.